As it is in everyday life, there are positives and negatives in everything, and BYU's contending quarterbacks for their starting quarterback position are no exception.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider on this here podcast, and as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $20 off your first purchase. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk BYU football, in particular the quarterback situation, and are there fatal flaws in any of these contending quarterbacks games that could essentially render BYU to say, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks when it comes to their chances of being the starting quarterback at BYU. Then we're going to flip over to basketball and talk about Robert Wright III. RW3 joining up with CP3. What could go wrong for BYU basketball with that combo working together? We'll explain a little bit more about that. And then we'll finish up today's show with our weekly insider group Q&A session. We call it our weekly mailbag, and we'll answer your questions you've got. So let's start today's show, and actually it goes to the mailbag because I had an original plan to talk BYU football more in general, but I got a number of questions, and they ranged from, Jake, what do you make of Bear Bachmeier's game? Jake, have you seen this video about McCae Hillstead and his ability to throw the deep ball? Hey, Jake, have you seen this on Treyson Bourguet? And it all revolves around each one of these guys' game, and what I mean by that is their skill sets. Now, each of them brings unique things to the table, but they're all endeavoring to do the exact same thing, and that is be BYU starting quarterback. We have belabored the point for a long time now, but it is only going to get more and more talked about as training camp rolls along. The situation is that each of them have pluses, each of them have negatives, but are any of those what I would consider to be a fatal flaw in a way that would render me, if I were the coaching staff, to say, yeah, I appreciate this kid, but I just cannot have that in his game? The good news is I don't necessarily recognize that there is a fatal flaw outside of the fact that the situation is if you are going to throw interceptions on a routine basis, that's a bad deal. So, for example, on Tuesday, man, days are rolling together. On Wednesday, when we were out at BYU training camp, the first practice, during media observation, Treyson Bourguet made a poor read. And obviously, he'll go into film study and try and correct this. But Raider Demooney recognized exactly what the read was, recognized that Treyson Bourguet was likely to throw the ball where he threw it, jumped the route, picks it off, and likely would have housed it for a pick six had it been live action football. What I'm looking forward to today is to see if Treyson Bourguet can avoid a glaring issue like that once again. That is the fatal flaw that I honestly believe that any one of these three quarterbacks, if they possess it, that will essentially negate them from being BYU starting quarterback. Looking at it on its head, each one of these guys, and we'll start off with McCae Hillstead, like I said, have both positives and negatives in their game. Positives for McCae Hillstead is a true dual threat quarterback. Any of you who watched him at Skyridge High School, and if you didn't, you missed out because he was worth the price of admission himself playing for the Skyridge Falcons. But he is a true dual threat quarterback, legit track speed, has a really, really strong arm, and has the capability of doing everything that Aaron Roderick asks of a quarterback in his offense. The negatives? He's 5'10". He is shorter than your average quarterback. And yes, he's still a little bit slight of build. He's listed at 190 pounds. That's great. But 5'10", 190, that's not a very big human being. And I also had another question. I have to look it up and see who asked it. It said, Jake, what is your concern level that McCae Hillstead can endure a Big 12 schedule because he got beat up at Utah State? I will say this. There is absolutely a concern on that. Can he hold up physically? But I will also add the caveat that I would take BYU's offensive line right now over anybody that Utah State had on that O-line then when he was playing for the Utah State Aggies. I think they will keep him far cleaner in the pocket than they did up in Logan. That's the point I would make there. Now, if you flip over to Treyson Bourguet, as I understand, is the best pure thrower of the football for BYU's quarterback contenders here of the three. He can sling it at any angle, can maneuver his arm angle, throw off platform, all the technical jargon that you want about quarterbacks. He's got that capability, but the bugaboo in his game is he as fleet of foot? Is he as inclined to run the football and as natural a runner as you want your quarterback to be in Aaron Roderick's offense? That's kind of the holdup. He also has very good size. Listed, I think, is 6'2". He's got the requisite height you want as a quarterback, and he's well put together in terms of his overall weight, height, and all that type of stuff. So that's what you bring with a guy like Treyson Bourguet. But the other question is if you look at his stats from Western Michigan, he had 2 years where in many respects, he probably could have seized that job out in Kalamazoo, but never seized it. Why? Well, I think there were some turnover issues. I think there was an inexperience issue that was at play. And also, he played for 2 different offensive coordinators. I hadn't realized this until he pointed it out the other day. This is for the first time in both high school and college for Treyson Bourguet. He has continuity as an offensive coordinator. He said, I had a new offensive coordinator every year in high school. I had a new offensive coordinator every year at Western Michigan. And then for the past 2 seasons now, it would be last year and this year for BYU, he finally has continuity with an OC. That could be interesting to see what he's capable of doing now that he's familiar with BYU's offense more fully. Then what brings us to Bear Bachmeier. Bear Bachmeier, at least I think the chief strength he has or possesses, and it may not be a strength, is I believe he has the highest upside of any quarterback at BYU right now, and that includes even Emerson Guilman, who, trust me, a lot of people are really high on Emerson. I will get a note in on this because I was asked to address Emerson's situation. We'll get to that. But the thing with Bear Bachmeier is you can see the physical tools in this young man. He's already 6'2". He's already 220 pounds. I stood next to him during his media session, and he is every bit the athlete that he has been proclaimed and believes himself to be. He wears the number 47. You may think that's wonky. You may think that's weird. I think it's absolutely fascinating to see a dude slinging the rock wearing the number 47 because I associate number 47 at BYU with linebackers like Paul Walkenhorst. That's a throwback for you guys. That's how my mind works. But nonetheless, his ability to run and throw the football, it's McCae Hillstead-esque, maybe even more at a more physical level because he can run through people if need be, unlike McCae Hillstead, who seemed to have to run around people because he's more slight of build. That's maybe the chief difference in the running ability of Bear Bachmeier versus McCae Hillstead. If I were to pick a quarterback who I think is the fastest, it's probably Hillstead, but I'm telling you, Bear Bachmeier is not far off of it. And if you look at some of the highlight reels of Bear in high school, he can absolutely sling the rock all over the field. So that is going to play into his role. The negatives about Bear Bachmeier, he's 18 years old. He is a true freshman quarterback. BYU has never in game 1 in program history ever started a true freshman quarterback. I think Greg Wrubell pointed out that 10 freshmen have played games for BYU or at least started games for BYU, but not a one of them ever started the season opener for BYU. So that might be the one thing working against Bear. And that might be something you both are worried about or maybe not are worried about, but yeah, it has to be acknowledged. Now, I have to remember, it was a YouTube comment that asked me to address Emerson Guilman's situation. The situation with Emerson Guilman is he is a really talented quarterback. Any of you who watched Bountiful High School, him help engineer a state title run last year alongside Siaki Fekitoa, their star running back. Emerson Guilman has got a lot of nice skills, but much like Bear Bachmeier, he's 18 years old and he is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and plans to go on a mission after this upcoming season. That is why I believe that Emerson Guilman, even though he may be getting some reps in practice, is not a serious contender for this job because he has endeavored or planned to go on a mission. And you're not going to start a guy, I don't think, that has plans, to up and leave after the season concludes. Now, proves to be the best quarterback, maybe he postpones those mission plans and sticks around. But that's why I think the Emerson Guilman situation, I talk about it as a 3-way race. I know Kalani Sitake said it could be 4 ways. I just don't see Emerson Guilman, in my opinion, being a serious contender for that job. So let me just know what you think. Did I get the pluses, the minuses, the positives, the negatives, the strengths versus flaws in each one of these quarterbacks game right? Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I'd welcome your feedback in the YouTube comments or via social media or even email. If you want to weigh in that way, always solicit any feedback we get, positive or negative. It's obviously something we enjoy because it helps me be a better host, but also I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of this? Am I up in the night and thinking that some of these guys, each one of them has, as we all acknowledge, positives and negatives to their game, but really the only one it feels like, at least a fatal flaw, is if they're going to be turnover machines, prone to fumbles, throwing picks and the like, that could, I think, sway the battle in any which direction it could go. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about Robert Wright III. Now, he is obviously expected to have a major impact on the BYU basketball season to come, but he got a major invite. He's already been a part of it earlier this week. RW3 working out with CP3. I think this is a home run for KYU, and I'll explain why next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Drip Drop. Obviously, a lot of us are trying to stay on top of a routine, whether it's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes. Hydration is key in any of that, and that's where our friends at Drip Drop come in. When you're on top of your hydration, everything works better. Energy, mood, focus, my skin. I can speak from that directly because many of you know I have a crazy schedule, but hydration is a major key to helping me stay on top of things. But getting enough fluids every day is not always that easy. That's why I want you guys to give a shot at Drip Drop, because I've really enjoyed what they've sent over to me as well. When it comes to Drip Drop, it's doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. Uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. That's an incredible thing to do. And the best part is you can keep these in your backpack. They're little packets. You can toss them in a water bottle, drink it, and like I just mentioned, you can stay better hydrated throughout your day. So right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use the promo code Locked On College. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Locked On College for $20 off your order. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of your guys' support. It feels crazy to think that we're already in August. 7+ months are gone from this 2025, but hey, football season is nearly here. We're in the 20s in terms of the days to count down to BYU in Portland State. Very much looking forward to it and hope that many more of you will be subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing this with your family and friends, and being a part of this along for a crazy ride throughout this upcoming football and, more importantly, even in some cases, the basketball season. That brings me to what I want to talk about when it comes to basketball. Robert Wright III got invited this week to a prestigious camp. It's the Chris Paul Elite Guard Camp, which has been taking place down in Las Vegas. It's wrapping up today. He has spent obviously a long time on campus being a Robert Wright III, working out with his teammates, but this is an opportunity, even though he may have been missing out on workouts with his teammates because they did have practices this week, but working out with a guy like CP3, I think is going to be absolutely critical to what Robert Wright III is expected and hopes to accomplish as a BYU Cougar. It's no denying it that Robert Wright III is an undersized guard playing in maybe the best basketball league in the entire country. He is listed at 6'1". There are some people who think he might even be 5'11". Irregardless, and some of you are going to get mad at me for using that term, but it's my radio background. The situation is that if there is one person I feel like in the basketball world that can help Robert Wright III learn how to succeed as a smaller guard, especially a smaller point guard, whether it's the college or the professional level, there is nobody better, in my opinion, than Chris Paul. There's a reason why CP3 is going to play 21 seasons and counting in the NBA. Yes, I'm a Utah Jazz fan. I believe that Darren Williams was the better guard for a long stretch there, but CP3, for longevity of career, has absolutely knocked it out of the park. It's incredible to consider what his career has held and ultimately what he's been able to accomplish. But he has been undersized his entire career in the NBA, even in college. And I think he can help Robert Wright III understand what it's going to take to succeed and help BYU elevate itself in the Big 12 this season. There are ferocious defenses in the Big 12, and Robert Wright III knows about this because he played at Baylor last year. He's been in the Big 12. He knows what Houston can throw at him. He knows what his old team, speaking of Baylor, can do defensively with Scott Drew leading the way. He knows that teams are going to focus on him as the distributor to impact the ability for the ball to get to A.J. DeBonsa, get it to Richie Saunders, the lob threat is Keba Keita, getting it to Kennard Davis Jr., Tyler Miras, whoever else on this roster for BYU. The situation is if you can shut down the initial actions of an offense, well, you've already got an advantage in terms of the style play clock, and the like when it comes to basketball. And Robert Wright III has to be able to combat all of that. And I think Chris Paul is going to have a major impact on this. And it doesn't hurt at all that Chris Paul, has a pretty strong relationship with Kevin Young. They work together in Phoenix, and Chris Paul, from all reports, has been very eager to hop on phone calls, Zoom sessions, FaceTimes to talk with BYU recruits when Kevin Young's like, hey, you want to talk to CP3 about what I could do for your career? So I think this is a really, really nice thing to have in your back pocket. Speaking of a guy like CP3 working with RW3, and I think it's going to pay dividends for BYU because Robert Wright III, as I mentioned, he is critical to any and all success BYU is going to have this year. He's going to be the primary ball handler with that starting unit. And yes, his whole goal is to draw and kick and get the actions going on the offense that are going to allow AJ DeBonce and Richie Saunders, as who I think will be the two focal points offensively for BYU, to get into their actions. But that doesn't mean that Robert III can't run a pick and roll with Keba Keita, lob it over the top of the head of a defender, and let Keba Keita just crash down on that said defender's head with a monster dunk. He also has to be able to show that he can shoot at a high level. And shooting as an undersized guard in this day and age of basketball, whether it's the college or the pro level, it's getting harder and harder because guess what? These athletes playing basketball are huge. Let's just, for example's sake, Robert Wright III is listed at 6'1". I'm 6 feet, and I can tell you this much. I am a pathetic excuse for an athlete, and I couldn't even dream of getting some of the shots off that guys like CP3 have been able to get off their entire career. And I think that CP3 can show Robert Wright, hey, this is what you need to do in this circumstance to be able to make sure you have an open look. Chris Paul has been a deadly mid-range shooter for a long chunk of his pro career, and it's been a differentiator for him, even though he's an elite distributor. His ability to get his shot off, even as an undersized guard, is something that Robert Wright III also is going to want to master. So I think this invite, because I think it was limited to just 12 guys, 12 student athletes that were competing at the Chris Paul Elite Guard Camp. It's not like he invited everybody and anybody. It was a select group of individuals he brought to Las Vegas to work out with this. And I think that Kevin Young, in the relationship with CP3, I'm sure Kevin Young's telling CP3, hey, so Robert needs to work on this, and this. And CP3's taking notes. Okay, we'll do that. I think it's a major thing to have a guy like Robert Wright III working with Chris Paul, because I think that tandem, it could pay dividends for BYU being even better than we expect them to be this season. AJ DeBonce said it himself. The floor for this team, it's the Sweet 16. He said that with his own mouth. And there's a lot of people out there saying that BYU is a Final Four threat. They're a dark horse national title contender. Well, guess what? The only way you get that done is to have everybody in your program bought in and playing at peak capacity. And I think work like Robert Wright III is putting in, even though it may be away from working out with his teammates, but working with a guy who can help him become a better distributor, a better point guard. Hey, I'm all for it. And I think it's going to help BYU be even better this season than I think, quite frankly, any of us truly expect they can be, because I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around, and this just may be me, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that BYU is legitimately a chance to go to the Final Four, because let's be honest, BYU has the most NCAA tournament appearances of anybody in college basketball without a Final Four. Would they like to get rid of that the black mark on their NCAA tournament resume? Yeah, I think that would be something you could do, but just my jaded Cougar basketball self is like, okay, how's it going to go wrong now? Are they going to get upset in the Elite Eight or something going to go crazy in the Sweet 16? The whole focus right now is getting yourselves, speaking of BYU, on the same page right now, and just figure out what to do the rest of the time when you move on from that. And I appreciate the fact that Kevin Young understands the magnitude of what he's taking on here, because I don't think it's lost on him. It may be lost on me, and I'm like I said, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that BYU is legitimately in the mix to go to a Final Four. But hey, it's a new era for BYU basketball, and I'm going to have to get used to it. Season tickets sold out in record time. I know it missed a bunch of Cougar Club donors who missed out on that opportunity, but the Marriott Center should be a rocking environment once again this year. And the level of play, it was pretty darn good last year. I almost said a bad word there. It's going to be even better this year, because you're bringing the likes of AJ DeBonce, Robert Wright III, as I mentioned, just the guys they brought in via the elevation of the level of play should be that much more. And it was pretty darn exciting last year. Let's see how much better it can get this year. And I think Robert Wright III, he is a critical cog in all of this because, as I mentioned, he's got the ball in his hands a lot, and he's got to make sure he can make those plays or distribute the ball well enough to help BYU make the plays that can help them win at a high level. All right, we will finish up today's show coming up next, talking about what you want to talk about. It's our weekly Locked On Cougars Insider Group mailbag. We'll throw it open. We'll answer as many questions as we have in the time remaining. We'll get to that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, if you want to get to the events you want to go to, whether you're trying to go to a concert, and all of us have this circumstance where you log on to a website to get the concert tickets you're looking to go to, and then you lose your spot in line, whether your internet bumps or whatever, and you miss out on that opportunity. Well, live music should be about making memories, not having sitting in a portal or having to worry about getting the tickets, and that's where Game Time comes, and it makes getting your concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop the closer it gets to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with killer last-minute deals from our friends over at Game Time. The best part is you don't have to scroll through an endless list of ticket options out there. They have zone deals. Pick the best seats in the section for you. You just tell them what price you're willing to pay. And the best part is with Game Time, the price you see in the app is the price you pay. There's no surprise fees being tacked on when you go to check out. So take the guesswork out of buying your concert and show tickets with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, and of course, it's all guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Time to get into the mailbag, and if you want to be a part of the mailbag, it is reserved for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group members. We've seen a pretty noticeable uptick in the last roughly week of people joining up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's $5 a month to be a part of it. It supports the show, obviously, but more importantly, gets you the insider intel that you crave, and obviously gives you an opportunity to ask questions here on the podcast. And I guess the kicker, I should also mention this: 2 full weeks, 14 days of a free trial. So join today and be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, first question here. Christopher Newton: was a surprise for Celeste Moa to sign with Tennessee, and why did he not pick BYU? I think it was a longer question there, but I'll just narrow it down to that. The thing is, Celeste Moa was the younger brother of both Sione and Ice Moa, who played at BYU, but when those two left BYU, I think Sione ended up at UConn and Ice is at Michigan State. Celeste is a true national recruit. He's getting all kinds of attention. And I think that the Moa family, the connection with his brothers to BYU was going to help them had they been still at BYU. But with their departure, I think he was listening to major overtures. I can tell you that Utah Utes fans, if you looked at social media, they believed that they had it in the bag, and the Tennessee Volunteers and Josh Heupel just sniped him away. And I think Celeste is an elite athlete. I think he's going to be an absolutely incredible player, and I think that Tennessee got a good one there. Caleb: when do basketball jerseys for BYU go on sale? I need to get me an AJ jersey. I think they're already on sale in certain circumstances. I think the situation with AJ's, it may be that he actually has to be like enrolled in school. He's enrolled. I don't know. Maybe there might be some stipulation on this, but you may check like the Royal Blue Collective, Coug Connect. They may have some opportunities to get you the jersey you want. I know that there are some, I would call them, interesting websites out there that could also get you hooked up. So you may look into that as well. Robert: what happened to Hinkley Rapati, and how is he asking for a waiver, and what kind of waiver? It's a great question. Hinkley Rapati went on Center Street Media, which is a lot of podcasts, and said that he was coming back to BYU to play. Well, he wasn't on the roster when BYU gave it to us on Wednesday, and all the reporting out there, I think Jerem Jordan and others are saying that he's seeking a waiver. Well, that waiver could take time, and until he gets said waiver, he's not going to be able to play football for BYU because he's out of eligibility unless he has that waiver. I think it's probably portending to his injury history, probably seeking a medical hardship. Until he gets that, he cannot do anything officially with BYU as much as he would like to, but I think that's the circumstances where things are right now. Alex: this is a good question. Do we know about how many interceptions a starting quarterback throws during fall camp? Might be worth asking. I'll see if I can get a question in to guys like Aaron Roderick and see if what answer they give. But remember, Jake Gretzloff had that famous streak in spring camp. Was it earlier this year? Was it last year? Whatever, where he didn't throw an interception. So as few as possible is ideal, but I think that it's something I think that you can muster a handful. But if you're throwing one a practice, yeah, that's absolutely unacceptable, because if you throw more than one a game, or even one a game, that's pretty bad. That's not something you want to see. An underrated theme, this comes from Tyson, of last year's success was the injury. When injuries hit, the backups balled out. So when the injury bug hits this team, where is the team most vulnerable? Or in other words, what under the radar backups will need to step up the most if injuries hit? I think the defensive line, because there's so many unknowns at defensive end. There's a lot of bodies, but no proven commodities there. So if the top guys who emerge get injured, are those next step down guys, and that sounds bad, but you know what I'm talking about, the backups, are they capable of holding up? When Keanu Tanavasa needs a blow, are the other defensive tackles capable of being the same disruptive force he expects to be? I think at cornerback, for example, Evan Johnson, Maury Bamba, I think they're really, really strong 1-2 combo, and Jonathan Cabea as well as your nickelback. But are Trey Alexander and the other cornerbacks, Marcus McKenzie behind them, are they capable of being the guys stepping up from there? On offense, I think it's the offensive line, especially at offensive tackle. I think Isaiah Jota and Andrew Gentry are going to be very, very solid. But our guys like Andrew Phillips, Ethan Thomason, who am I thinking of? Other tackles that are in the mix. Caden Chittister, are they capable of being the guys if one of those tackles goes down that steps up and they don't miss a beat? You need stuff like that. So those are the positions to keep an eye on, I think. I'm trying to think any others. Wide receivers, okay. I think, quarterback, obviously. You need to be ready for a quarterback. Let's see. Other questions here. There's a lot of hype about LaMason Waller when he signed. I haven't heard anything about him since. Is he not measuring up? Not measuring up, just getting outplayed, injuries, or do you expect him to be in the mix this fall? Now, LaMason was a high-level player in high school, obviously down there in Southern California, and BYU was very excited to sign him. We had him on this podcast, and dude's an awesome interview. He's fun to talk to. The situation is just wide receiver is a logjam of talent. I've seen LaMason out of practice, and he has made standout plays in spring ball. I expect him to make some standout plays in fall camp, but there's just a pecking order at wide receiver, and he's got to be able to climb over a number of guys. So we've been out there for 15 minutes so far. So stay tuned. I'll pass along anything I learned, but I just don't think it's that too early. Like I said on yesterday's podcast, if you're an everydayer, we're not playing real football yet. So take everything with a grain of salt. These are some great questions here. Let's see. Justice here from the Great White North here in Cache Valley, Utah. All right, Justice. Thank you for representing up in Cache Valley. Says this: how long do you think it would take for a Big 12 football team to be considered a real contender in the national championship race? Or is that something that simply won't happen in the current state of college football? If you go by narratives, it's going to be some time because we have ESPN stumping for the SEC. We've got Fox stumping for the Big 10. And all they do is like propagandize us. I think that's the right term when it comes to those two leagues, and thereby they get a leg up. And if the college football playoff goes the way the Big 10 wants, they'll have even more guaranteed slots in the college football playoff. The biggest thing the Big 12 can do, to your point, Justice, is just go out there and have a team that is just so dominant that they pile drive everybody through and just win a national title. That only feels like the only way that you're really going to get the respect the Big 12 craves and desires. And I know that sounds really tough to do, but that may just have to be how it goes. I don't know. I do think that it could happen in relatively short time, but could a team like a Texas Tech, could all the transfer portal stuff that they did this offseason, the money they're throwing around, could that lend itself to winning a national title? That's a big question, obviously. Let's see. Damian Garbero here. This is a good question. How long do you think coaching staff will wait to give reps to the leading candidate quarterback, not naming the starting QB, but giving the leading candidate more reps than the others? Starting next week-ish, maybe a week and a half, because you have to start sinking more reps into who you think is the guy to see if your assumptions or your belief that that's the guy is true. So I think it happens pretty quick. So maybe by the middle part of next week, you start sinking maybe a few more reps into who you think the leading guy is, but something to pay attention to here. Man, great. Like I said, I had a lot of the quarterback questions. I think I addressed most of them in the first one. Brett asked a question about if McCae could survive in the Big 12. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. Non-football question. Where is your favorite place to take the wife to dinner? Okay, Mrs. Hatch. I essentially have a few go-tos when it comes to if we're going to go out to eat that I have in my mind. She really likes Texas Roadhouse, for example, and spare me your hot takes about Texas Roadhouse. She likes it. There's a few other places, and I essentially have an idea. It feels like about okay, I'm gonna take her out. Let's think of okay, we're gonna go here, here, or here, and I'll have like those three. And I'm like, hey, where do you want to go to eat? And she'll like throw a curveball at me. She kind of just flies by the seat of her pants in that respect and decides, hey, I'm feeling like this. Let's go do it. And I can respect it. I'm a guy. I say this all the time. It sounds cliche, but I'm up for eating almost anything. I am an open book when it comes to food. I will try everything at least once, and it's kind of funny to see how often she'll change your mind on something and throw me a curveball in that respect. And also, a football question. This comes from Kent, by the way. If the quarterback competition is super close between Bachmeier and Hillstead, let's say they're even, who would they start and why? Well, the conventional wisdom is you start the younger player because obviously they have the higher upside. They have the longer time to play. So if it comes down to the Bachmeier and Hillstead are the 1-2 and they're neck and neck, I think you'd be hard pressed not to put Bachmeier in there and just kind of take the good with the bad. Just saying. I think that'd be what you have to pay attention to. Okay, good one here from Landon. Another food one. Astro Burger, Crown Burger, Burger Supreme, or Apollo Burger. He says, I'm partial to Astro, but that's me. I'm gonna maybe hurt your feelings, but it's Crown Burger all the way in that quartet. I am a Crown Burger disciple. The original Crown Burger is one of my guilty pleasures. Any of you who have had it here in Utah know what I am talking about. And he also adds this: Cafe Rio or Costa Vida, aka the right choice. Talking about Costa Vida. Okay, this might be a take that's going to get me canceled. Neither, because I'm not a big fan of either. I'd rather go to many other Latin or Mexican related restaurants rather than eat Cafe Rio or Costa Vida. So that may get me canceled, but I am just not a big fan of either. I'm like, I think they taste the same. Team tastes same. I don't know. That's just me on that front. All right. I think I got through all the questions here. Like I said, a bunch of the quarterback questions. I think I addressed mostly all the topics that were kind of thrown at me. Oh, one more real quick. Jeff Henor, who is the most likely player to go first round? I think he's talking about the NFL draft. I know it's a stretch, but if you had to pick one, who would it be? Keanu Tanavasa. I think the dominant defensive lineman, disruptive defensive lineman, especially defensive tackle types who have the body type that Keanu has, 6'4", carries 300 plus pounds like it's nothing. Like I carry 200 pounds. It's incredible to look at him. That's the guy. If you're going to peg one guy to be a potential first round draft pick, if he's really that disruptive, that dominant this year, that my money's on Keanu Tanavasa being that. I just don't see anybody else really being in the first round mix, even though I think Isaiah Glasker, Jack Kelly are absolutely bona fide NFL draft picks. I think Celia Sarah in time is, Chase Roberts is, Andrew Gentry should be, Isaiah Jota, if he has the season some expect, he could be an NFL draft prospect. So, but if you want a first round draft pick that, if you mentioned it may be a stretch, I'm putting my money with Keanu Tanavasa. All right, that's going to do it. As always, thank you for all your support. You guys are the absolute best. We'll be out at practice later on today. Some of you will be watching this after practice has ended. It's around 11 a.m. Mountain Time, but we'll have full reaction. We'll put some podcasts up with the press sessions that we collect, and obviously have my insider intel coming to you guys if you're a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, so sign up for that right away. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. And until next time, my friends, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.